We're starting a new series on T2C called When Broadway Comes Rushing Back. And we are starting it with two of my favorite people, Bonnie Comley and Stewart Lane. You two were above the curve before anybody else was starting Broadway HD. Can you talk about what gave you the idea and how it came about?
Well, Stu and I have been involved with what are called digital captures for many years. A digital capture is different than a movie in that it is, you bring the cameras into a live performance with the audience there. So that really was our core content and still is our core content. It's different than a movie that it's taken outside, it's off of the stage. So we've been involved with those for many years. In fact, the first one that Stu did was back in 1993, which was the Will Rogers Follies that was at the Palace Theater. And at that time, really the reason why it was captured was for Japan Satellite Broadcast to do as a pay-per-view in Japan. So over the years, we've been able to do these captures of shows that we were working with or that colleagues were working on. And probably about like 8 years ago now, we had done about 10 of them. And we were, every time we had done one, people were like, oh my God, that was amazing. This is so great. You should do this with every show. But they were so hard to do and so expensive. And we just barely made our money back, if we made our money back on these, that we kind of looked at each other and said, where is the business in here? And so we thought, what? The whole world is going towards streaming, so let's aim to that. And at that time, we had about 10 shows, which a streaming platform does not make with just 10 shows. So we started to aggregate this content. And just over 5 years ago, we launched Broadway HD with just over 100 shows that we had put together. And now we have over 350. Yeah. So it's evolved, but that was basically it, was that we wanted to find a way to bring all these, if you wanted to watch theater on a screen, that's what we were doing.
So it was a matter of changing audiences and culture. The technology was developing, and for the first time in years, the audience that goes to Broadway and touring companies was younger. There were actually, more and more excitement coming from the young kids from high school and colleges than the were that were over 45. And I saw that growing as an audience. And as Bonnie was saying, we kind of did some research over the years. It was a trial and error method where, if you add in DVDs, is it going to work? If you add in pay-per-views, is it going to work? There wasn't enough of an audience, of a critical mass to make it work until the audiences got younger. And how did these young people watch their shows? On their iPads, on their cell phones, on their desktops. And that's where Bonnie and I saw that as the future for capturing live theater, that experience, to enhance and excite people about seeing live theater and going to it. Sort of as a marketing tool. If you liked it on screen, wait till you go see it live.
What is your favorite show that you've been able to capture and share with audiences?
Oh, I've got a favorite, yes. My favorite is 42nd Street.
That was brilliant.
That was brilliant. This was a production directed by Mark Bramble, who was the original book writer of the show, and he'd been there when Gower Champion created it. So he was able to really capture the spirit and the flavor of 42nd Street and what it meant in terms of New York, Broadway, and a real Valentine to both of those. So that was one of the most exciting shows. And the show itself, for me, was significant because it was one of the first major turning points in 1981 that created Broadway, started to make Broadway exciting again. We'd just gone through a decade of cultural change, transformation, and finally that year you had 3 major Broadway musicals taking place. There were some years you couldn't even get 3 or 4 musicals. This year you had Sophisticated Ladies, the Duke Ellington musical. You had Woman of the Year with Lauren Bacall. That was my show. And you had 42nd Street. And full disclaimer, that was my show. And 42nd Street, which was just tremendous because it really put a spark into the Broadway culture and ignited what I think were the 1980s that just started to get better and better as we went from decade to decade.
but the show that we have is actually a revival. It's not the
Right.
1980 version, but the one that we do have, there's like 53 people in the cast. So it's a huge production. It's just beautifully done. And as Stu said, it was directed by Mark Bramble, who unfortunately passed away shortly after we finished the capture.
I was very blessed to be invited to that premiere, and it was so exciting. And to watch the tapping and to be able to see the tapping. If you were a dancer and if you tapped, it was so exciting. And I used to tap, so I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Bonnie, what?
It's amazing. I mean, you know, that somebody's actually doing that in real time, as opposed to a movie where you just do your one dance and then you
Right.
take some time off in the trailer for a day or two after that.
Well, that's one of the appeals, many appeals of Broadway HD. We kind of added a sense of authenticity to what the production you see. So, you know, we don't cut away to another scene. There's applause. There's the actors and actresses on stage catching their breath after doing a dance number. It's watching Jane Krakowski do a split, and She Loves Me, and realizing she does that 8 times a week. You know, that kind of thing. Yeah, amazing. So it's exciting. It's a different kind of experience.
Bonnie, do you have a favorite?
I love 42nd Street, but for me, it's really hard to pick a favorite because they're sort of like children, and that, you know, like these take so much time and effort and resources to do each one of these. So Broadway HD has shot about 30 something of them at this point, and then the others that we've licensed or co-produced with partners. But it's hard to actually pick a favorite. You know, it's like saying, you know, do you have a favorite show? I mean, people sometimes gravitate towards the first show they ever saw or something, you know, that they were at a special event that, you know, it was an anniversary or some sort of celebration. But it's really hard, and each of them that we've done have you know, just it's a plays versus the musicals. I think there's you know, a real value to everything that we've gone out and shot and everything that we license.
I think one of my favorite that you've put up is Indecent, because I thought that was such a genius play.
Yes, and it was just an important piece of theater that you know, didn't last long enough. Sorry, we have a dog.
That's okay. I have a cat that I'm expecting any second to enter.
We saw her in the background.
Yes. But with Indecent, I think that's one of the things that, you know, the legacy that Broadway HD will leave behind is being able to extend the audience of these really beautiful, important stories. We're doing that with a Trailblazers rail that we've started, now it's about 2 years ago, where we are telling stories and featuring shows that didn't last very long, or that didn't have a very wide audience. They're, you know, very niche, but and they're hard to put them back up in front of an audience. They're just so expensive to mount some of these things. And Indecent on Broadway was just beautifully done. And Paula Vogel just, you know, that was a story that just needed to be seen by a wider audience. So we're very proud of that one.
As you well know, I'm not always the most politically correct human. And do you think that shows, African American shows that don't tend to normally have an audience because they don't have the money to go to Broadway, do you think that Broadway HD is a way of expanding that?
You know, that's, you know, it's a very complex sort of a complex question, because we, you know, and really struggle with that when we're looking at a show. You know, who's the audience for this show? The Broadway League, which is the trade association for the producers, presenters, the theater owners, and the general managers, has been around for years, and they have been taking statistics on who is the ticket buyer. And for as long as they've been taking those statistics, it's been basically the same person. It is a white, over 40 woman that has, you know, further education, and usually has higher disposable income. So it, you know, and that reflected in the, you know, the $125 average ticket price that we had back, you know, just a year ago. And is it, you know, if you do different types of stories, will a different audience show up? Is it because there isn't their stories on stage, or is it because they it's just not part of, their entertainment, norm to go to the theater. And we never have really answered that question, but I think that when we reopen, there'll be, it's a chance for everybody to have a real reset and to look at that and to say, is it, BIPOC stories versus white stories, or is it just human stories? Is it everybody's stories? Can we be colorblind? Are we colorblind, or do we have to be color, conscious in our casting? So I think those are, questions that are still out there that need to be addressed. But I do think that things are going to be very different when we reopen.
I think they're going to.
If you look at the history of Broadway up to this point, there's certain shows like A Trip to Bountiful that were very successful, that appealed to all audiences. Or going back, because I'm older, to Sophisticated Ladies, the Duke Ellington musical. Sort of a crossover. Both black and white audiences can enjoy it. So there's no, it's a matter of dancing and music. So there are ways of moving forward with that. And you see it in other mediums, like Bridgerton recently, with a multicast, inappropriate for its time period, but certainly works dramatically and terrific acting, and they look beautiful. So, and so you accept, when Bonnie and I produced The Best Man, we cast James Earl Jones in the role of the President of the United States in 1962. Well, that would never have happened, but the actor, overcomes that. It wasn't a play about race, it was a play about politics. And it worked really well.
And again, the play was not done in 1962. It was set in 1962. So,
right. But I mean, I saw that play and reviewed it. And honestly, I did have a problem with that. And the reason I had a problem with it is because you were dealing with race issues back then. And this made no sense to me, seriously. And I'm sorry. But I think, I'm a big August Wilson fan, huge August Wilson fan. And none of his plays have ever made money, even though they win Tonys. And so I find it sad. And I find it, I don't even know what the word for it is, because a lot of the press releases that I've gotten for shows that are going to open on Broadway are African American. And I'm like, wait, will this sell? Will this bring Broadway back? Because I'm a firm believer that I want Broadway back. And I think shows like The Music Man right now are shows that what people are ready for, because everyone's so broken. I think that show will do really, really well. So I wasn't planning on going here yet, but let's go there. The Palace. The Palace was under renovation. So you guys didn't really deal with this, correct?
Yes. It was heartbreaking for me initially because, this has been a new golden age for Broadway. I've been doing this for 40 years, and I've seen us go from the depths of degradation and poverty of the 70s to enormous success and popularity to just pre-virus. So it was kind of sad that I had to shut down the theater in the midst of this new golden age and renaissance of Broadway. Of course, 2 or 3 years into the renovation, the virus hit, and I've got one of the few theaters that's actually generating some income there.
I'm excited for you. I was when I realized this, because the Times had said all theaters had been packed and were ready to show their shows. And I was like, wait, Palace, it was under renovation.
That's right. We just.
What are you planning to bring back to Broadway when it opens? Do you have an idea?
For the Palace, or for
the Palace
in general? Oh.
No, we have a clean slate. We were open to a lot of possibilities. And of course, by the time we were able to open, the landscape might change again. So we're gonna hold off.
In talking about what you're bringing?
Yes.
Are there shows that you're nurturing right now? Because I know that you nurtured American in Paris. Are there shows that you're nurturing right now?
We're always developing things. Some of them are just in little teeny tiny, infant stages, but we're always looking, we're always developing things. So the answer is yes. We don't have anything that we can, fully, announce, because they're too, even if they were further along in this climate, we don't know when theaters are going to open. And which theater is going to be available. So I think that the regional theaters, the touring Broadway theaters will probably it'll be the regionals that will open first.
I
And
agree with you.
the nonprofits in New York City.
I
So
agree.
on Broadway, it'll be, I think there's 8 nonprofit theaters in New York City out of the 41. And I think those will open first because they have a different financial model than
Right.
the commercial theaters. So those are patron supported in addition to being supported by ticket sales. But they will be able to social distance. They'll be able to do, more of the, not that they will have the same COVID restrictions when everything opens up, but there will be, again, things are going to have to be different. And I think people are going to be more, there's still going to be concerns, I do believe. So I think that, the nonprofits will be the ones that can say, hey, we're doing this for the good of the, the community and the audience. So you have to put the economics on the side and let's just go forward with this. So those were the ones that will open up first. And again, the nonprofits are the ones that are known for telling, more diverse stories,
Right.
than straight ahead commercial theater. At least that's been the history of how commercial theater has gone. So we'll see, we'll see what happens when and what that timing is.
I think for Broadway's resurgence to come back, you need to think about the tourist and when can they come back. And I think that's the one thing nobody has talked about,
Yeah, I mean, again, with the reset and how Broadway's going to look when we come back, but what we know is what we had for the history of Broadway, what the ticket buyer was. The ticket buyer was an over 40 white woman that had, the higher disposable income and
Right.
further education. I think that, that's what we're going to, to look at. And what that, the price of tickets is that still going to be in
Right.
place when we come back? But the statistics again show that 60% of the tickets were bought by out-of-towners. Some of those were overnight guests in New York City, and some of them were, just tri-state area. But now you're counting on the 40% that are the tri-state area that would just come in for the day to be, for those numbers to flip in order for the economics to work. And even with 60%, it didn't work before. So if we're talking about any sort of seating capacity that's lessened, it just, unless you really raise the ticket prices for the shows that are there, again, all to be seen with vaccines and how they roll out and how tourists come back. But for the start, to your point about the tourists returning, our previous business was 60% ticket sales to tourists.
I think we need to roll out a new version of I Love New York commercials.
There you go. I love those.
No, because when I was in California and younger, what brought me here was those commercials. I loved those commercials. I was like, oh, I want to be there. I want to be in this.
Well, see, you are the commercial.
I am.
That was exactly what we need.
What kind of shows do you see coming to New York and succeeding when it reopens again?
Again, I think that anything is possible. It's things that with the marketing, we're looking at things that already were on their way that had a really good, the Hamiltons, the Lion Kings, the
Right.
Wickeds, the Book of Mormons, those will probably return. And those won't have as much of a problem with being recognized, because I think people could enjoy going to see those again or going with someone else. The problem with the older shows, or the challenge there, is that a lot of people already saw them. So that the first people to see shows, how it was in the past, was the tri-state area would see it first, And then, that would be the first year or year and a half. And then we'd go to the 60% that we relied on the tourists. So those shows, that's the challenge that they'll have, is they'll have to appeal to those, those tri-state area people again.
Nostalgia.
Yeah, so going forward, it'll have to be, I think there's going to be a lot more things that have brand recognition. I know people, sort of don't like to hear me talk about brand and commercial theater.
No, I do.
But, when you're at the intersection, which Broadway is, as I said, there's 41 Broadway theaters, 8 of them are nonprofit theater companies, which means the remaining theaters are commercial theaters. And what commercial theater is all about is it's ticket sales. It's entirely funded, and it lives and dies based on the sale of those tickets. And the tickets are, we tried to, keep within a certain ecosystem of, it doesn't, these tickets don't go beneath a certain price. And then for a while there, we tried to, they don't go above a certain price, but when we open back up, is it going to be the distancing, and so the ticket prices are going to be something really high. So you're going to go for things that I think there'll be, to start, my prediction is that there's going to be things that are going to be one-person shows, or they're going to be celebrity driven, short-term runs, or concerts that are people that we recognize or that have a huge fan base. Those types of things are easier and have always been easier to sell tickets than to, oh, I've got this beautiful, lovely new story by someone you've never heard of, starring great Broadway talent. And those are, yes, those can work, but it takes so much more of a a marketing and publicity lift to put them in front of the competition that's out there, which what we did have for competition was, you had 41 Broadway theaters. So your show, you were competing with 40 other Broadway shows. And then there's about 200 off Broadway. And then there's off Broadway. Then you have the Metropolitan Opera and the ballet and other dance companies and comedy clubs and cabarets. So New York City, the competition was endless for what you could see at 8 o'clock at night on a stage.
Right.
That's not, you're competing against Netflix or YouTube with cat videos or something else that are also distractions that people could be watching instead of going to the theater at 8 o'clock at night.